Welcome everybody. So this is another webinar on undergraduate studies, and today we are going to talk about the application checklist. And we are with us to talk about this very, very important topic is Dr. Donald Martin and Miss Deborah Zakarian, if I spell correctly. I'm sorry, my apology if it is not. So Dr. Donald Martin, as you may be knowing, he has already been taking a lot of webinars. Last year we had this year. He was a former Dean of Admissions and Dean of Students at Columbia University, University of Chicago. Columbia, you may be knowing, is Ivy League University. University of Chicago is one of the most prestigious university. Booth School of Business, Northwestern University, Wheaton College. And he has in his tenure has evaluated more than 125,000 applications and double the number of letter of recommendations and other things. And he has been since working with the students across the different continents, more than 50 countries. He is a columnist. He's writing a lot of articles. He has written a great book, Roadmap to Graduate Study, which is we are available. Any students wants it, we'll be shipping it free of cost to them. And he has been taking such webinars and seminar sessions at various universities across the globe. And he is the expert. So with his experience actually evaluating the student profile, he will be just talking about today's topic is very, very important because now we are in a phase where the applications, we have to start filling the applications, and by 1st November, we should be able to start pushing the applications part. So with this, and along with him, the Deborah, so she is really expert into the undergraduate admission. She has been mentoring the students since so many years. We have very successful sessions. She has conducted part of the webinar, last two webinars, and really every students and the parents are really appreciative of that. So welcome both of you, and I request you to now take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr.
One last thing. You can start typing the questions in a question answer tab. After the finishing, we will take the question answers. Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that, by the way. That is something we very much enjoy, as you will hear in just a moment. But first, once again, thank you so much for taking time to join us today for this webinar. We are delighted to be here with you, and we are delighted to have the honor and the privilege of working with Dr. Dioris and his team at Astute. I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Dioris almost 12 years ago now, during a webinar just like this, where he happened to find out that I was giving the webinar. He joined us for it, and afterward, he and I had a chance to connect and communicate, which led to what has been an amazing, amazing experience working together these past several years. And I'm so thankful for this opportunity to work with him. For those of you, he would never say this himself, but I can tell you the Astute Academy is the best you'll ever find in India. They are absolutely outstanding in the work that they do. And the proof of that is in the tremendous success their students have had. So we are honored to be here today. I'm also honored to introduce again my colleague, Ms. Deborah Zakarian. I've worked with Deborah for the past several years in this arena of graduate and now undergraduate applications. She does an outstanding job. She's been a great addition to the team. And as Dr. Dioris said, you're going to hear from her actually twice during our presentation today. She's going to be sharing some information as well as I. So Deborah, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here with me.
Thank you, Dr. Don. I'm excited to join our webinar this evening.
Okay, now, what are we going to discuss today during this short time? Well, there are three major areas that we're going to cover. And this first one, if you have joined us for prior webinars, you will recognize this, because to me, it's one of the most important components of preparing applications at whatever stage you are. We may have individuals joining us today who are in the 9th standard, the 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard. We may have parents joining us. We may have some school administrators joining us. Whoever that is, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. And this information in the first bullet point, the biggest mistake prospective students make, I could not emphasize enough. So that's the first point we're going to cover. Then Debbie, my colleague Deborah, is going to join us to talk a little bit more about the importance of planning ahead for your applications. Then I will step back in and discuss a suggested 12-month application checklist. Ms. Deborah will come back and share a few comments for us in closing, and then we will be almost ready. I'll have a few final comments to make before we begin answering questions. And please, as Dr. Dioris indicated at the start, please ask any questions you would like to. We love questions. There are no bad questions. There are no dumb questions. If you have something you'd like to know, we want you to ask. We've had some wonderful question and answer sessions in our prior webinars, and I'm sure that will be the case today. So with that said, let's jump in here and get started. What do you think, if I were actually speaking with you in person today, and I could go around and ask several of you, what do you think is the biggest mistake prospective college students make every year? And by the way, this is a mistake that is made all over the world. It isn't just in India. It's in the United States, Canada, Europe, Asia, South America, Latin America, Australia, Africa, everywhere. Prospective college students tend to make this same mistake every year. If I were to ask you, what do you think it might be? You might have several answers, and many of them might also be good. But there's one that, in my opinion, stands above all the others, right at the top, as the biggest mistake you can make as a prospective college student. And here it is: not doing adequate research when? Before applying. In other words, we have a tendency in our society, wherever we live, to be very caught up with, in the terms of the education field, something called rankings. These are lists that are prepared by, sometimes we don't even know the backgrounds of these individuals, which is one of the problems with them. But they are prepared often by magazines, newspapers, for a ranking of institutions at the undergraduate level or at the graduate level within a certain field of study, graduate study. The problem is that they only highlight a very small number of institutions when, in fact, there are a much larger number of institutions that are equally strong as those being cited in these rankings. One of the services Ms. Deborah and I do for a student is called shortlisting. If we work with a student that has come to a student who a student is helping, we will provide a short list of institutions for that student to consider. And do you know how many we usually provide? We usually provide between 45 and 50 on average. And there are over 3,000, between 3,000 and 4,000 accredited, fully accredited undergraduate institutions in the United States. It doesn't stand to reason that there are only 5 or 10 or 12 that are worth your consideration and no others are worth that. Absolutely not. So as you contemplate your upcoming undergraduate education, if you are seriously considering coming to the United States for this purpose, we urge you, we ask you to please do your research. And I could spend a lot of time talking about that part. That's for another day. In fact, we did discuss this in earlier webinars. If you have access to those, you can hear the comments on how to do good research. But one thing I would like to say before I turn the mic over to Ms. Deborah is remember that perception is where you end up after you do your research. It's not where you start out. What's very disheartening to me is when students prepare a list of schools to which they're going to apply without having done any research on them. They just have accepted a ranking or word of mouth. You should be doing some very intense research before you decide where you're going to apply, so that you could start off with several options and narrow that down to the group to where you will submit applications. I urge you, please, we both do, Ms. Deborah and I would think Dr. 𝐂𝐤𝐝 also. We urge you, take the time to do good research before you apply. Now, why is planning ahead so important in all of this? Spending the time, planning ahead, doing research, starting out early. Well, for that, I'm going to turn it over to my capable colleague, Ms. Deborah, who is going to have some comments to share with you, and then I'll get back on. Whoops, I almost undid my speaker too soon. I'll get back on after that. Okay, Ms. Deborah, I will let you take it away here.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Don, and hello, everyone. Well, let's continue with our webinar and talk about why planning ahead is so important in the undergraduate application process. First of all, planning ahead allows you time to do quality research. As Dr. Don has just shared with you, and we have shared on previous webinars, the biggest mistake students make is not doing this research at the beginning of the process. It takes time to research programs and schools. And with almost 4,000 accredited colleges and universities here in the United States, you need to plan ahead and do your research, because your list of schools is going to drive the entire application process. Number two, planning ahead allows you to think through things in a relatively calm manner. We all know what it's like to feel rushed and to be stressed. And when we're in that situation, we really can't do our best work. Some students, believe it or not, will wait till a month or two to start this process, and that is just not enough time to do a quality job. When we rush, we make mistakes, and you want to give yourself time to think in a calm manner about this process and make very good decisions. Number three, planning ahead also gives you time to focus on your standardized test preparations in addition to your application work. As you know, you'll be taking various standardized tests, the SAT, the ACT, perhaps the TOEFL, and taking AP exams in May. And you want to stagger this work so it's not all happening at the same time. Now, there are situations where you will be doing both together. For example, perhaps you're taking a second SAT in the month of August of your 12th standard. And at that same time, you would be working on your common application. But you want to do your best to plan ahead so that you start on those tests early and you're able to devote quality time to each component of your application. And finally, planning ahead helps you to have a far less chance of rushing and making needless mistakes. You want to make sure you're providing the correct information to each school and for each application. Every school has different requirements. You want to make sure you're sending the right essays to the right school and the right number of recommendation letters, and really taking your time by planning ahead to do the best application that you can submit. Well, this leads us to our next question, which is, how can I stay on top of everything? This is a lot of information, and submit my best applications on time. And the answer to that is twofold. Number one, by being organized, and number two, by starting your process early. And Dr. Don is going to come back on now and introduce to you our 12-month application checklist to help you through this process. Dr. Don?
Thanks so much, Ms. Deborah. That was excellent, very helpful information. And yes, as Ms. Deborah has said, I will now pick up with what we call the 12-month application checklist. Now, let me just say, if you are already listening to this webinar today as a 12th standard student who is getting ready to submit applications within the next month or two, obviously, some of this may not apply totally, but there are some things here that still could be very helpful to you even at this stage. So we did this with you in mind. We did not want to upset you or think, oh my gosh, I haven't had 12 months to do all of this. Well, you haven't had a chance to do all of it, but all hope is not lost by any means. And as we get closer down to a few months before applying, there will be some very good, helpful information for you as well. But let's start with 12 to 10 months out, ideally. If you are about a year to 9 months out from starting to apply for your undergraduate education, we suggest these items. First, we think it would be very helpful for you to create what we call an application spreadsheet. What would be on that spreadsheet, for instance? Well, these would be the alphabetical listing of all the institutions to which you are interested, not to where you're going to apply yet. This is well before that. This is at the beginning. You're going to list, and we hope you will have quite a few that you place on this spreadsheet. As I mentioned, place them in alphabetical order, and then on the other side of that spreadsheet, what are the criteria you would be most interested in evaluating for each of these options? There should, in my book, in the first chapter, which is dedicated completely and entirely to the research process for your education, I list 26 areas you might want to compare between options. And there are more. There are more. That's just a small sample. There are so many areas that I would think would want to be evaluate. Now, one of them I would strongly recommend is the following. How am I treated by the admissions office throughout? If I start interacting with them, how are they treating me? How do I get the sense that they really care, that they're very interested in my success, that they want to help me? Do you get that sense? That's because how you're treated as a prospective student isn't going to change when you get there. In fact, it could be worse. So if you start off with a negative impression of that institution, you need to write that down on your spreadsheet. Keep that in mind. Don't forget that. But you also, I would think, would want to know how large the institution is. How many students are at this institution? What type of facilities do they have? What type of student organizations are available to you? Do you have information about the curriculum, about the faculty, about financial aid? What type of financial aid do they make available to international students? On and on and on. There's a host of things. And so this way you have a more organized way of evaluating your options. This is very important. And if you're doing this well ahead of time, it will help you then to narrow down where you want to ultimately apply. And lastly, when you do this, as you fill in these boxes on that spreadsheet, maybe you give a letter grade. Like I spoke with this admissions officer, I give them a C. They didn't do very well. Or in our country, we have the letter grading, A, B, C, D, or F. If you get an F, that's really bad. So what kind of grade do you give them for their contact? Whatever. Conduct your research, but please be honest with yourself. Don't sugarcoat things. Don't pretend something is a little less than what it really is just because you initially thought you wanted to go to that institution. Forget what you're thinking. Remember, perception comes when? After you do this, not before you start out. Your perception comes after you've done this kind of research and been fully honest with yourself. Okay, so that's how to get started here. And by the way, those of you in the 12th standard who are getting ready to apply, you could also create a spreadsheet like this for the institutions where you apply and start keeping track of how they do things with you, how they treat you. Did they let you know that they got your application? Did they follow through with something else? If you reached out to them, did they respond? How did they treat you? You could do the same thing even at this stage in the process. Okay, 9 to 7 months out. Where you can, this is the time to start planning some campus visits and admissions events. Now, granted, if you live in India and you're wanting to study in the United States, you are not going to be able to visit in person all of the institutions on your spreadsheet. Obviously, that would be impossible. However, most institutions offer what is called a virtual campus tour that takes you on a complete tour of their entire campus. I would have that as one of the items on your spreadsheet. What do I think of this campus? And for 12th standard students who are about to apply, if you haven't done it yet, take a virtual tour of the campuses of the institutions where you're going to apply. This is very helpful. And if there is an admissions event being held either in India near you, some schools do that, or more likely a virtual event where you could join on Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams or some format where you could join in and participate in an admissions event. That's very helpful. Maybe you'll do a couple for each school if you have the time and you can do it. And again, where does this information go about your reaction to, your feeling about this event? On your spreadsheet. That could be another column. Well, how did I feel about the campus visit or the admissions event? What do I think about the campus? Have two virtual tour of campus as one, or what does the campus look like? That's one column. What do I think about admissions events would be another column. Next, this is the time to start preparing for your standardized tests. If you have an SAT, if you have a TOEFL or IELTS test, or maybe you're going to take the ACT. This is the time to start preparing to take these tests. What you want to try and avoid is trying to prepare for them at the very same time that you're trying to set up your common application and get all of your application materials ready. That's an awful lot to do in one space of time. So if you can start doing this part a few months out, that takes that off your list a little sooner. And another third thing here is, here's something else I think is very, very important and should be on your spreadsheet. What do current students or recent graduates think about this program? This, I would think, in your network, your parents or your school administrators, your friends, there may be individuals who know someone who went to the college you're thinking about, college or university, or is there now. This would be a tremendous opportunity for you to reach out to them. All you have to do, you can ask more questions, but at least 2 questions you could ask. 1, what do you or did you like most and least about this program? And if they're being honest with you, they should answer for both of those, what they like most and what they like least. No institution is perfect. You're not looking for perfection. So it's helpful for them to tell you that. And the second question, I think, is almost more important than the first. The second question is, if you had it to do over again now, knowing what you know about this college or university, would you still go there? Very, very insightful questions. You're not going to hear this anywhere else on a webinar, I promise you. This is not information that is readily provided. This is something that will help you tremendously as you narrow down your options to those institutions. So on your spreadsheet, another column. What do current students have to say about this institution, or what do recent graduates have to say about this institution I'm considering? Okay, now 6 to 4 months out. Here again, you want to sit in on some admissions webinars like the one we're offering today. These are not necessarily webinars provided by the institutions you're considering, but webinars provided by educational, excellent organizations like 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐞. 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐞 provides these webinars all the time. And so you want to sit in on some of them and get your feet wet about some of the things to be expecting, to be thinking about This is why we offer this series of webinars. We're going to have 2 more coming up about the application process in particular. That will be of even more interest to our, I'm sure, 11th and 12th standard students, but to parents, to students, to administrators across the board. But this is the time to sit in on such webinars like we're doing today to help you gain some additional information that will be very useful as you are preparing your applications. Secondly, this is the time to confirm who is going to provide letters of recommendation for you. Ideally, you want to have these confirmed far enough ahead so that you're not just all of a sudden contacting them and saying, will you do this, without much warning or not giving them much time to prepare their letters. I've spoken about this in prior webinars. Recommendation letters can make or break your application. Truly. As Dr. 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐫 said at the beginning of this presentation, I evaluated well over 125,000 applications during my 28 years working at Columbia, Northwestern, University of Chicago, Wheaton. If you take a look at that, you'll remember that there are at least 2 letters of recommendation that accompany every application, and sometimes 3. So what does that mean? That I probably evaluated or read between 250,000 and 400,000 letters of recommendation. I read a lot. I don't say that to boast, but to let you know that I'm telling you this based on that 28 years of experience. Recommendation letters that are written well, where the recommender does what they're asked to do, are few and far between. Most recommendation letters did not help me. 95% of them did not help me. So you want to confirm your recommenders so you can work with them, coach them, if you will, help them to help you by providing the very best letter they can. Here's something else you could be doing a little further out. Finalize your resume. Get your resume completed and ready to go. And then make sure you have a transcript ready so that when it comes time to open your common application and you can start uploading documents, you can just go ahead and put your resume in there. You can put your transcripts in there. You could put your test scores in, you've got this information ahead of time so you can easily start uploading that once you open and create your common application account. Okay, now let's move to the final 3 months of this process before you submit your application. Obviously, our 12th standard students have already done this. You want to open your application accounts. We suggest doing this in August, which is when they usually become available, the common application. So we suggest that you do this and then start working on this. And you will obviously have one major essay for the common application, but then you will have some supplemental essays for the schools to which you're applying. They will be asking additional questions. So you want to get started on this. We urge you to start working on this as soon as you can open that common application account. Secondly, this is the time to check in with your recommenders, making sure you provide them, for instance, a copy of your resume. Maybe you'd like to provide them with a sample of an essay you're working on. It may not be the final draft, but something to give them a little more information about where you're coming from in this process. You might want to share a brief statement if you don't have it in the essay that you let them see. You may want to provide a short paragraph on your short and long-term goals after you finish your undergraduate education. This way, they have some very up-to-date, recent, pertinent, relevant information on you to use in their letter. So this is the time, again, to get that done. And finally, obviously, this is a big portion of these applications. Spend quality time on those essays. If you can get that other information entered earlier, get your resume uploaded, get your recommender information uploaded, get your transcripts uploaded, get all that part done. Fill in the name and address and all the demographic information. Do that as early as you can so that you leave time to really focus on your essays. In other webinars, we'll be talking about this matter of the importance of your essays. This cannot be stated enough. Again, obviously, they can make or break an application as well. So this, by starting early, by creating your application account early, then you have the time to begin to work on essays so you're not rushing at the end. Okay, that's our suggested 12-month checklist. Now, whoops, Daisy, I got a little ahead of myself here. Let me now turn it back over to my colleague, Ms. Deborah, who's going to close us out now with some reminders about some of the things that we have shared so far. So, Ms. Deborah, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Don. And we wanted to leave you with 6 tips to remember as you prepare your applications. Wherever you are in this process, these tips will be helpful for you. The first one is, as Dr. Don has shared, and I know we keep saying it, but please do your research. Take time to look at schools and programs and really think about what is important to you. Don't just rely on rankings and word of mouth and suggestions if it's not something that really seems that it would be helpful to you. What you do at the beginning of this process with your list of schools is going to fuel everything. So really take time with your research at the beginning. Number 2, and this is very important, to know your timelines and your deadlines. Whenever you're working in this process, you need to be organized. We suggest creating a spreadsheet or some type of document where you can list all your criteria. When you get into the comment application, you'll have a dashboard section where you can put your schools in there in order of application due date. You want to start early with this. If you were just applying to 1 or 2 schools, you may be able to keep everything in your head okay. But most students are applying to 7, 10, 15 schools, and they're going for scholarships. That's a lot of information, a lot of dates to keep track of. So know what these timelines and deadlines are and stay organized through this process. Number 3, like Dr. Don said, get your recommenders confirmed early and keep them informed throughout the process. Here in the United States, many high school students will ask teachers to be a recommender, and they need to ask those teachers early because most teachers will only do a certain amount of letters. And once that's confirmed, then closer to the time of the application, providing your recommenders with the information they need, such as your grades, your resume, your goals, as Dr. Don shared. A letter of recommendation is not good if it doesn't give specific information about you and give the admissions committee information that they will need to evaluate your application. Number 4, and this is also very important, open your common application as soon as you can. When the application opens on August 1st, that first week, we encourage our students to fill in their basic information, your demographic information, your family information. You can put in your extracurricular activities, your volunteer work, the things that you already have. And then you can also research schools in the common application. If you're looking for an additional school or program, you can look it up by the school name. You can also do it under certain parameters like geographic area, if you want to add some additional school information. And once your schools are inputted into the common application, under the My Colleges tab, you will be able to see the requirements for each school. What is the SAT requirement? What supplemental essays do they have? How many letters of recommendation you need. So the earlier you can open up this account and get your information in, this will help to guide you through the application process. And this leads us into number 5. And as Dr. Don has shared, spend time on your essays. This is the chance for the admissions committee to hear your voice. There are not as many interview opportunities at the undergraduate level, unless perhaps you are going for a scholarship or you are doing an honors college application. So this is the chance for the admissions committee to hear from you. And it's a very, very important part of your application. Most of the essays that are in addition to the Common App essay would be available to you early in September or by mid-September, and you want to make sure you're planning this process out so you can devote adequate time and do very good work on your essays. And finally, after all this is said and done, try to enjoy the process. If you plan ahead, if you're organized, if you've done your research, you really can enjoy this experience. Think of it this way. For years in school, you have worked hard. You've studied. You have probably given up social time or sleep to do your best work. You have participated in extracurricular activities and you volunteered. This is a chance for you to celebrate your accomplishment. You want to do your very best work so you can provide your best applications and find the right school that is the best fit for you. Thank you so much for your attention. And now I'll turn it back to Dr. Don, who will talk a little bit more about our work with the Astute Academy. Dr. Don?
Thanks so much, Ms. Deborah. And I'm going to ask you to stay with me now on the camera since I'll be talking about the work that both you and I are doing. By the way, once I finish with this part of the presentation, we're going to be moving toward the Q&A section of our presentation, questions. I hope you've been writing them down, putting them in the chat box there for Dr. 𝐸𝐸oris. He's going to be kindly monitoring this for us and asking questions. We love them. We love questions, so please start putting them in if you haven't already. We would. And by the way, if you have a question about something we didn't talk about today related to the undergraduate application process, please put it in there. We're happy to address any questions you have. Okay, very quickly, if you were to choose to work with the Astute Academy, and I hope many of you will, you will be in for an amazing experience, I can tell you that. And by the way, Dr. 𝐸𝐸oris does not ask me or pay me to say any of this. I'm saying this of my own volition. I have had 28 years, actually 43 now, if you add my time with my own work with Grad School Roadmap. I've had 43 years in this industry. And when I say that this is worth your time with Astute, it's based on all of that experience. This is an amazing premier academy, the Astute Academy. So the work that we do with Dr. 𝐸𝐸oris and his team, we've obviously been doing for over 10 years now. We've had a very, very high acceptance rate of the students we have helped Astute to work with over the years. I'll let Dr. 𝐸𝐸oris discuss that if he wishes, but we are very happy. I will say this much. Last year, we began the undergraduate mentoring process in greater detail. And that's when Ms. Deborah joined us for this endeavor. And we're happy to say that all of the students we worked with, the undergraduate applicants, were admitted to one or more of their top choices and with scholarships. So we have a very high and very successful acceptance rate. We're able to start mentoring as early as the 9th standard. We don't necessarily have all of the clients we're working with are not in the 12th standard. We are working with students in the 11th, 10th, and 9th standard. In fact, in some ways, the earlier you start working with us, the better. We have a little more time to help you prepare. But the point is, you can start that early. We can assist with all kinds of issues that you might be dealing with or about which you would have questions. As you see here, school search, resume prep, essay review. We can do anything that you would like to have us help you with. We are able, because of our experience, we can step in and work with you in any of these capacities. Whoops, let me go back. So that's a brief description of the work Ms. Deborah and I have been doing and are excited to be continuing to do with the Astute Academy. Thank you now for your attention these last 40 minutes. We've gone through quite a bit of information, and I am now going to move to the Q&A section. And thank you, Dr. 𝐸𝐸oris, for getting back on. Thank you so much for the opportunity you have given Ms. Deborah and I to work with you and your team. It's been absolutely amazing, and we're hoping now to be able to answer some questions for our audience.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excellent presentation by both of you. And really, such things are not available anywhere in the internet. These are coming from the personal experiences of over 43 years, you can understand what level of the commitment Dr. Donald Martin and Ms. Deborah is providing to you all. So let me take the one by one question.
Okay.
There is a first question. What should the research include? This is from Afra.
Okay, good question. The research on your undergraduate program options should include what is most important to you as you contemplate moving abroad to do your undergraduate education. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, I would urge you, at the request of Dr. Diores, to reach out to get a copy of my book.
Yeah.
Because in the first chapter on the research, I list 26 areas for you to be considering as you weigh your options. But very quickly, for purposes of this question, I would certainly think that you would want to know about financial aid opportunities for international students, for instance. That's one column on your spreadsheet that I would think you would have. Another would be, what is the overall enrollment at this institution? And then what is the average class size? How large might the classes be that I would be in? Another question many students ask is, what's the ratio of faculty to students? How many faculty members are there per student? If that ratio is really high, 1 faculty to 100 students, that may not be what you're interested in. You might want a faculty-student ratio of 1 to 10. That's something. As I mentioned earlier, how do I feel about how I was treated by the admissions office? Anytime I reached out to them, how did they treat me? What do I think about an admissions event I attended, a virtual event, or what about a virtual tour I took of the campus? What do I think of that? What do current students say about this program? What do recent graduates say? Those are some things. And then there could be others that are maybe you or your parents have talked about it, and there's a particular geographic region you would prefer in the United States. That's something else that you should put on there. So this is a great question, but those are some of the things that I would think, Ms. Deborah and I, that you would want to consider as you do your research. Good question.
Yeah, thank you very much. So those of you who wants the book of Dr. Donald Martin, please just send us a message with your address, and we'll be happy to ship the book to you, so that which contains, as Dr. Donald Martin has said, all the details about almost 26 different spreadsheet options which are there. Another question, when to select major and minor subjects?
I'm going to take a stab at this, and then I'll ask my colleague, Ms. Deborah, if she wants to add anything else based on her experience. But typically, while you may be asked to discuss a major that you're thinking about during the application process, most students that are coming in terms of at a general education level do not have to select a major until after the end of their sophomore year. They don't absolutely have to do this, or a minor. You have some time to make that decision before you get to your junior year, but not when you start out as a freshman. There could be a few differences. If there is a particular specialization, let's take computer science or engineering or things of that nature, if that's an area that you're interested, some colleges may want you to declare that right up front as you apply, and maybe you would be admitted based on them knowing that at that stage. But generally speaking, you will not have to choose your major or a minor until well after you have already enrolled. Your first 1 year for sure, and maybe 2 years, will be taken with what we call core requirement courses, general education requirements that every student must take. Ms. Deborah, did I cover that okay? Is there anything you'd be wanting to add?
No, I think that's correct. For some competitive programs, you will have to select your major For example, as you used engineering, but you wouldn't necessarily have to pick the type of engineering until either later in your freshman year or in your sophomore year. And then your minor would come as you complete your general coursework. So that's right.
Yeah,
Thank
so yeah, for your information, the terminology which is being used, the freshman is the first year, sophomore
Yes.
is called the second year, and then the junior and senior, that is the third year and fourth year. That is how the 4 years course is refreshing. So if I translate into the years, if you can choose, actually you can change the major even after 1 year being into the university systems. And there is a tremendous flexibility being provided because many times students are not clear what they want to do in life. And first year is also, which is the freshman year, is lot of university core subjects. You will have the different multidisciplinary subjects from social science to different subjects, which will make you, which is essential for the career progression. So, but normally in India, definitely we would look at narrow down. In common applications, many universities are asking top 3 options. They want to know which career you want to really choose ultimately, because, and that is sometimes it is good. Another
Excellent.
question, can I get a spreadsheet for the reference part? So, yeah.
No, that's not something we have chosen or have elected to provide at this point. But I do believe if you were to check in with Astute about this, someone there might be able to give you an idea. But basically, this is a very simple Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
If you go onto Excel, create a spreadsheet, and then it's up to you, either on the left-hand side of the spreadsheet or across the top. Either way would first be what we would propose, an alphabetical list of your options, whatever they are, that they would be there. And then the other part of the spreadsheet would be the items you are going to compare, the criteria that you want to compare: financial aid, campus visit, admissions events, treatment of the admissions office, whatever. Those are the things that would be on the other columns of the spreadsheet. A very simple Excel spreadsheet, nothing detailed, nothing terribly laborious.
And once you get a book, it will have the complete all the points which are there. So please do send us the address so that we can ship the book to you, which will have the complete details. What is to be included in resume?
Typically, at the undergraduate level, there will probably be, I would think, 3 or 4 major components of the resume. The first, obviously, would be your educational information: where you've attended high school, what your academic standing is, and if you have been recognized or given any sort of honors for your work academically. Maybe you were selected as the recipient of the outstanding student in your class in your 11th standard, or you won a contest in your field of study that was done. You scored in the very top percentage of a national examination. Any of those things would go under a general umbrella called the academic information or educational information portion of your resume. All of them very, very important. And then equally important is a second section of your resume, which we could call it extracurricular activities, community service. Sometimes students will combine that section and it will say community and extracurricular involvement or extracurricular/community service. This is your chance, as Dr. Diores mentioned earlier, to feature and highlight what you've been doing outside of the classroom, because in the US, that is very important. Students do not get admitted to the US just because of an outstanding academic record. They get admitted because they have an outstanding academic record combined with a level of experience, involvement, activity, and work outside of academics. Now, please don't hear me saying that you have to have 15 different activities under this section. Not at all. Some students I've worked with, that Ms. Deborah has worked with, have, I happen to have a family member, actually, excuse me, two family members, both of whom were getting ready to go to college, and I had an opportunity to help them during the application process. One of them was outstanding, among other things, in the field of dance, in particular ballet. They did this for several years leading up to their application. Of course, that went on their resume, but it's not as though they had been devoting 10 or 15 years to 5 other things. It was a very specified area. The other individual focused on a sport called volleyball. And this individual was very active throughout high school, did very well in the pursuit of volleyball. So whether it's sports, the arts, others get involved. I've been amazed at the number of extracurricular and community service activities that our Indian students take on. And it's very important that you have this. And please don't start doing some of these things just 3 months before you apply. That's going to be very telling if you only wait to do these until you apply. This should be, again, part of your journey through high school. And then lastly, you may have a small section called skills and interests, which just kind of explains some of your technology skills. Also, do you speak more than one language, your language abilities, and some personal interests you have, like chess or debate or cooking or something like that. Those are the 3 main areas that the resume would mostly entail. Ms. Deborah, anything there?
No, I think you've covered that. And again, just trying to have the student be well-rounded, while we realize the students have a lot academically, but participating in some other things outside of school so they can have a well-rounded application.
So next question, if I don't get a university of my choice, can I take a transfer later? When to start working on transfer applications?
Excellent question. And the answer is an overwhelming yes. You absolutely can transfer. That is done thousands, if not millions of times every year here in the United States. This does happen where someone did their best work to identify the institution he or she thought they wanted to attend, and then when they got there, it just wasn't what they thought. Ideally speaking, if you know fairly early on that this is not working, as soon as you know that, then is the time to start thinking about transferring and finding out what the transfer application deadlines are for the institution or institutions to which you want to transfer. Typically, now I don't have absolute hard data to back this up. It's something that I have tended to have a hunch about over time. Many students or more students transfer after their second year than after their first year. Typically, students spend 2 years at one institution and then they will transfer to, it's a little harder for you to perhaps really know for sure when you've just been at this institution for a few weeks as a freshman. Now, sometimes it happens that someone says, I just know this is not for me and I want to, then that's okay. But most of the time, I think most students who do this spend 2 years at the institution they're at and then and transfer applications are widely accepted very positively. This is not a negative. There's no, oh, why is he doing this? Or why would she want to transfer? Is there something wrong with them? Not at all. There's a very readily available understanding that sometimes this happens. So you can absolutely apply to transfer. Yes.
Thank you very much. Next question, how many universities should we apply?
Good question. The Astute Academy offers tremendous help with students as they are providing, once, let's say, Ms. Deborah and I have provided a short list for consideration, Dr. Diores and his team very, very, very competently and capably advise 12th standard students, okay, based on this short list that you have, where should you focus? What institutions should you apply to? That said, on average now, this is an average, there's no requirement. I would say most undergraduate applicants apply to between 7 and 10 programs. That's an average. Some may apply to 20, some may apply to 5. That ends up being a personal decision, of course, that you make. Now, I will say this, the more competitive the institutions you are thinking about, you have to keep in mind that the more competition there will be among the applicant pool. So you want to be careful. And Dr. Diores and his team do a very good job of helping students be what we might call realistic. Approach this very honestly. If you're going to apply, let's just say, if you want to apply to Stanford University, you need to know that the chances of getting in are extremely low. That's not to stop you from applying. It's just that you need to be very cognizant of what you're going up against. So in the end, the number of schools you may choose to apply to may in part be determined by what level of competition you are interested in. And that's where the Astute team comes in. I believe the tremendous success we've had with our undergraduate mentoring program has been right there, where we provided a short list. Dr. Diores and his team take over, work with each student to determine, okay, based on this, where are you going to apply? And it has proven very successful.
Great. Another question, very, very popular actually in India and everybody's mind is, does the university rank matters? And how can we check the quality of the education in specific university?
I'm so thankful someone asked this question, and I know Dr. Diores knows, and of course, my colleague, Ms. Deborah, what I'm about to say. In my opinion, since you're asking me, does the ranking of an institution matter? By and large, my answer is no, it doesn't. Now, here's why I say that. But before I even do that, please don't hear me saying that you shouldn't consider applying to a very top-ranked program. No, you should. If you want to do that, I don't think you should not consider any. But here's my point. The rankings of institutions are made by individuals largely who are looking to sell a publication, a newspaper, a magazine. They're trying to generate business. And if you look a little bit behind the curtain, when you get a ranking, if you look to see what was the criteria that were used to determine this ranking, some of the methodology doesn't even make sense. And I find it baffling how this happens sometimes, and yet they put this information out there. So I know your other question is, okay, Dr. Don, if you don't think rankings are the best source, how do I find out? Well, here's the short list that we can offer is a place that we could help you. But even before that, if you log on to your internet browser and you type in something like best programs in, I'm just going to pick a field, let's say biology, best undergraduate biology programs in the United States of America. You could get lists of these that could be in the hundreds. In the hundreds. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3,000 to 4,000 accredited universities in the United States. And we don't have time for this today, but the accreditation process to get accredited in and of itself takes years. And then you have to be reaccredited every so many years. You are never fully done, in other words. You are consistently having to demonstrate that you deserve to continue to receive that accreditation. That's for 3,000 to 4,000 universities. It makes no sense that there are only 10 that are worth your time, not by any means. And one of the things that I would think would be very useful for you is when you do a search on an institution, you might plug into your browser something like this. Penn State University in the news. Not don't go on their web. You could go on their website too, but or just type in Penn State, what has been happening recently at Penn State University. You will get quite a bit of information that will never appear on their website. So this is something there are also, now I don't know this as well, so I want to be very careful not to misspeak, but sometimes this doesn't happen always. There may be some information on the student satisfaction level at an institution. In other words, you could type in student satisfaction survey for the University of Alabama. What do students say about that to me is the proof of the pudding. What do students, they're the ones paying the money. They're the ones spending the time there. What do students or graduates have to say? That's why, as I said, when you do your spreadsheet with your network, ask around. Does anybody know anybody who's attending this school or went here recently? I'd like to talk with them. That's a far better way and when you do that virtual campus tour, when you do that admissions event, when you reach out to the admissions office, all of those things are helping you. That's your impression is just that. That's how they're responding to who? To you. That's why the spreadsheet is so important and why those are the things to consider. You can be pretty much guaranteed at an accredited institution, you're going to receive a very solid academic education. You don't have to worry about that. That you will get. So I could go on and on. I better stop here or I'll wear out my welcome. But that's a very good question. I'm so glad you asked.
There is another question from Rian. Is there any option to get admission to one or more universities?
If I'm understanding the question, this student would like to know if you can be admitted to more than one university at
That's
which
right.
you apply.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely, yes. Many of our clients with Astute have gotten into 2, 3, 4. They've gotten into several. Oh, yes. Yeah, it is very possible. In fact, that usually happens where you will be admitted to more than one of the institutions to which you apply. And then you go through a process of deciding which of those offers you will accept. And there again, that what comes into play at that point, how do they treat you after that? How do they show you their interest in you? And what financial aid are they offering? What scholarships are available? What opportunities do they give you to speak with other students, with faculty? Absolutely, yes. You will most likely get admitted to more than one institution. Absolutely.
That's all the questions I think we had today.
Good.
We had the festival going on, so slightly I think
Yes.
some of the people were quite busy. But
That's okay.
really very, very quality questions. So all the questions were very high quality. Really appreciate every student, parents to ask the question.
Absolutely.
And, really thank you very much, Dr. Donald Martin and Ms. Deborah for really providing the excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello.